The day a man believes he has taken everything is often the day he loses the one thing that truly mattered. The marble steps of the Manhattan family courthouse glowed beneath the pale autumn sunlight as reporters crowded behind silver barricades, cameras flashing like distant lightning across a stormy horizon. The city moved around them in its usual rhythm, yellow taxis rushing past, businessmen speaking into phones, tourists staring up at towers of glass and steel. But for Ethan Whitmore, the world seemed unusually quiet. At 39, Ethan had everything most men spend a lifetime chasing. He was the founder and CEO of Whitmore Holdings, a billion-dollar real estate empire that dominated skylines across America. Financial magazines called him visionary. Business networks called him unstoppable. Investors called him a genius. Today, they called him the winner. As the courthouse doors opened, Ethan stepped outside wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. His silver watch caught the morning light. His expression remained composed, controlled, almost indifferent. A dozen reporters immediately surged forward. "Mr. Whitmore, how do you feel after the divorce settlement? Is it true you retained full ownership of Whitmore Holdings? Any comment regarding your ex-wife?" Ethan paused only briefly. "The matter has been resolved," he said calmly. "Nothing more, nothing less." The answer was polished enough to appear in tomorrow's headlines. Behind him, several attorneys exchanged satisfied smiles. The settlement had been extraordinary. The penthouse overlooking Central Park, the private jet, the investment portfolio, the luxury properties, the controlling shares of Whitmore Holdings. Everything. Ethan had kept everything. At least, that was what everyone believed. A few seconds later, another figure emerged from the courthouse. The crowd immediately grew quieter. Amara Brooks. Unlike Ethan, she wasn't dressed for victory. Her charcoal coat was simple. Her heels were practical. No jewelry decorated her wrists. No diamonds hung around her neck. Even her wedding ring was gone. Yet somehow she carried herself with more dignity than anyone standing there. The wind gently lifted a strand of her dark curls as she descended the courthouse steps. No tears, no anger, no dramatic confrontation, just silence. A silence that felt strangely powerful. Many people expected bitterness from a woman who had seemingly lost everything. Instead, Amara looked peaceful, as though she knew something no one else did. Her lawyer walked beside her. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. Amara's eyes remained fixed on the Manhattan skyline. The towers shimmered beneath the morning sun. Buildings she had once admired. Buildings she had once helped dream into existence. "I'm sure," she answered. Her voice was soft. "Certain." The lawyer hesitated. "There is still time." Amara smiled faintly. "No," she said. "There isn't." Across the plaza, Ethan watched her for a brief moment. 10 years. 10 years of marriage reduced to signatures and legal documents. For reasons he couldn't explain, he expected her to look defeated. Instead, she looked free. The realization unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Then he noticed something unusual. In her hand was a small wooden box. Nothing expensive, nothing remarkable, just an old walnut box no larger than a hardcover book. She held it carefully against her chest, the way someone might carry something irreplaceable. Ethan frowned. Every asset had been accounted for during negotiations. Every bank account, every investment, every property. The box certainly held no financial value. Still, something about it bothered him. "What's in the box?" he asked suddenly as she approached. The question surprised even him. Amara stopped. For the first time all morning, their eyes met. For a brief second, memories flickered between them. A tiny apartment in Brooklyn. Late nights sharing takeout while planning impossible dreams. Sketches spread across a kitchen table. Promises. Hope. Love. Then the moment vanished. Amara glanced down at the wooden box before returning her gaze to him. A gentle smile touched her lips. Not cruel. Not triumphant. Almost sad. "You already took everything you wanted, Ethan." The reporters instantly leaned forward. Microphones lifted. Cameras zoomed in. Everyone sensed a story. A final confrontation. A dramatic farewell. But Amara simply adjusted her grip on the box and turned away. After several steps, she paused. Without looking back, she said quietly, "Besides, the one thing that truly mattered was never yours to take." The words settled into the cold Manhattan air. For the first time in years, Ethan Whitmore felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not victory, not satisfaction. Something far more dangerous. Doubt. And as Amara Brooks disappeared into the crowd carrying the small wooden box that nobody considered important, neither of them knew that the contents hidden inside would soon shake an empire worth billions of dollars and reveal a truth that should have changed everything years ago. The wooden box remained unopened. 3 weeks after the divorce, it sat inside a steel safe hidden behind a painting in a modest townhouse on the northern edge of Atlanta. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting soft golden rectangles across the hardwood floor as Amara Brooks stood alone in the quiet living room. For the first time in 10 years, there was no penthouse, no assistants, no board meetings, no reporters waiting outside, only silence. And strangely, she welcomed it. The house was smaller than the closet she once shared with Ethan Whitmore in Manhattan. The kitchen held mismatched dishes she had purchased from a local antique market. The furniture was simple. The walls remained mostly bare, yet every breath felt lighter, as if she had finally stepped out of a room where the air had been disappearing for years. Across the room stood the safe. Inside it rested the walnut box, untouched, waiting. Amara wrapped both hands around a warm mug of coffee and stared at it. Not yet. Some memories required courage, and some wounds required time. Meanwhile, nearly 900 miles away, the empire Ethan Whitmore believed he had secured was beginning to bleed from places he couldn't yet see. The executive boardroom on the 72nd floor of Whitmore Holdings overlooked Manhattan like the bridge of a luxury ship. Normally, Ethan thrived there. Control had always been his greatest strength. But lately, something felt different. The quarterly meeting had already run 40 minutes longer than scheduled. No one was smiling. A projector illuminated charts across the wall. Numbers. Declining numbers. The kind investors hated. The Harbor Point project is delayed again, one executive said nervously. We've lost another design approval. A second executive cleared his throat. The Chicago investors are asking additional questions regarding ownership certifications. Ethan leaned back in his chair. His jaw tightened. Then answer them. We've tried. Try harder. Silence followed. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, the company's chief legal officer shifted uneasily. They aren't asking about construction rights. Ethan slowly looked up. What are they asking? The lawyer hesitated. Original intellectual ownership. The room became still. Outside the glass walls, helicopters drifted across the skyline. Inside, something colder settled into the air. What exactly does that mean? Ethan asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. The investors want documentation proving Whitmore Holdings owns certain foundational design systems. Ethan frowned. We've owned them for years. That's what we assumed. Assumed. The word irritated him. Nothing about Whitmore Holdings was supposed to involve assumptions. Everything had records. Everything had contracts. Everything had proof. Or at least, that was what he had always believed. That evening, after the board meeting ended, Ethan remained alone inside his office. The city shimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Thousands of lights. Thousands of stories. Yet his attention remained fixed on a thin legal folder resting on his desk. The folder contained requests from 3 separate investors, all asking variations of the same question. Who originally created the Whitmore Integrated Design Platform? The answer seemed obvious. Whitmore Holdings. His company. His team. His vision, his empire. And yet, a strange memory surfaced. A small apartment, a cluttered kitchen table, sheets of paper scattered everywhere, a young woman sitting beneath a yellow lamp, sketching, calculating, building something from nothing. Amara. The memory vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Ethan rubbed his temples. It had been a long day, nothing more. Across Atlanta, rain began falling softly against Amara's windows. She sat at her dining table surrounded by notebooks and architectural sketches. Unlike Ethan, she wasn't thinking about the past. She was thinking about the future. The company registration documents lay neatly organized beside her laptop. A new business. A new beginning. A new name. Brooks Design Collective. No investors. No billion-dollar expectations. No Whitmore legacy attached to it. Only her. For years she had worked behind someone else's spotlight. Now she intended to stand in her own. A gentle smile touched her lips. Then her gaze drifted toward the safe once more. Toward the box. Toward the secret that nobody had bothered to ask about during the divorce. Not Ethan. Not his attorneys. Not the courts. Not the media. Everyone had been too busy counting money. too busy measuring value using numbers. No one had looked deeper. No one had asked why she protected that box more carefully than every luxury possession she surrendered. Thunder rumbled beyond the windows. Amara slowly stood. For several moments, she simply stared at the safe. Then she entered the combination. The steel door clicked open. Inside, the walnut box waited exactly where she had left it. She gently lifted it into her hands. Her fingers traced the worn edges, the scratches, the faded corners, the marks of time. For a moment, emotion flickered behind her calm eyes. Memories, dreams, promises, the beginning of everything. But once again, she did not open it. Instead, she whispered softly into the empty room. They still don't know. Outside, lightning illuminated the night sky. And hundreds of miles away, Ethan Whitmore stared at legal documents that were about to lead him toward a truth capable of unraveling everything he thought belonged to him. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. Not in the stock market, not in the media, not even inside the boardroom. It appeared in a forgotten storage room buried beneath the headquarters of Whitmore Holdings, a room nobody had entered in years. The request had come from one of the company's newest institutional investors. Simple, routine, harmless. They wanted original documentation supporting ownership of several early development systems that had become the backbone of the Whitmore empire. Normally, such a request would have taken 20 minutes. Instead, it triggered a search that soon spread through legal departments, archives, and compliance offices like a silent infection. By noon, 3 teams were looking. By evening, 9 employees were involved. And nobody could find what they were looking for. The original files were missing. Not completely missing. Just incomplete. Certain signatures weren't there. Several registration records appeared unfinished. Some author fields had been left blank. And one particular document seemed stranger than all the others, because someone else's name had once existed on it, then vanished. The following morning, Ethan Whitmore walked into headquarters carrying the confidence that had built a billion-dollar company. By lunchtime, that confidence had begun to erode. His chief legal officer stood across from him in silence. The man looked exhausted. Ethan, that alone was unusual. Normally, everyone called him Mr. Whitmore. What is it? The lawyer hesitated. We found something. The phrase should have been reassuring. Instead, it sounded like a warning. What? The lawyer slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside were copies of old documents, design registrations, patent drafts, project proposals. Ethan skimmed them quickly, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. There, hidden among hundreds of pages, appeared a familiar signature. Amara Brooks. Not once, not twice, dozens of times. He turned another page. And another. And another. Everywhere. Amara Brooks. Amara Brooks. Amara Brooks. His heartbeat slowed. The room felt strangely quiet. What am I looking at? The lawyer swallowed. Most of these records date back 11 years. So, that was before Whitmore Holdings existed. Ethan looked up. The lawyer continued carefully. The earliest versions of the platform appear to have been registered under collaborative filings. Ethan's expression hardened. Meaning? The answer arrived like a blade. Meaning the foundation may not have been created solely by Whitmore Holdings. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Outside, Manhattan traffic crawled through the streets below. Inside, something shifted. A tiny movement. A crack no one else could see. Because for the first time in years, Ethan was confronting a possibility he had never considered. What if some of the most valuable pieces of his empire had never truly belonged to him? That evening he returned to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The apartment remained exactly as it had been before the divorce. Luxury furniture, rare artwork, imported marble, floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything perfect, everything expensive, everything empty. The silence greeted him immediately. No music, no laughter, no voice from the kitchen, no sketches spread across the dining table. No Amara. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and wandered toward his office. A habit he had developed years ago. Work always solved problems. Work always made sense. Until now. He opened old digital archives, photographs, project records, internal memos, and slowly, memories emerged from places he had ignored for years. There she was, a 22-year-old Amara sitting on the floor of their first apartment, sketching, calculating, building concepts long before investors arrived, long before Whitmore Holdings became a household name. long before private jets and billion-dollar acquisitions. Back then they had worked side by side, dreaming together, building together, believing together. The realization made him uncomfortable, because somewhere along the way, the story had changed. Or perhaps he had changed it. Across Atlanta, Amara sat inside a small community center surrounded by young architecture students. The room buzzed with energy, questions, ideas, possibilities. Nobody cared that she had once been married to a billionaire. Nobody cared about the divorce. To them, she was simply a mentor, a woman who listened, a woman who encouraged, a woman who remembered what it felt like to start with nothing. One student handed her a portfolio. Another asked for advice. A third nervously shared a design proposal. Amara smiled warmly at each of them. Patient, present, genuine. The kind of happiness that never appeared on financial statements. As the evening ended, an elderly woman approached her. You've helped a lot of people, Amara. Amara laughed softly. I'm still trying to help myself. The woman smiled knowingly. No. Her eyes drifted toward Amara's bag, toward the familiar walnut box resting inside. You've been helping people much longer than you think. A flicker crossed Amara's face. A secret, a memory, a truth still hidden from the world. Back in Manhattan, Ethan sat alone beneath the glow of his office lamp. The stack of documents had grown higher. The evidence had grown stronger, and the questions had become impossible to ignore. Then he found one final page buried near the bottom. A faded photograph. Two young dreamers sitting on the floor of a tiny apartment. Blueprints scattered everywhere. Coffee cups beside them. Hope in their eyes. On the back, written in Amara's handwriting, were 6 simple words. Our future starts with this idea. Ethan stared at the photograph for a long time. Because for the first time since the divorce, he wasn't wondering what was inside the box. He was wondering whether the greatest thing he had ever lost wasn't hidden inside it at all, but was the woman who walked away carrying it. Ghosts rarely announce their arrival. They appear quietly. A forgotten photograph, an old signature, a memory hidden inside a dusty file. And once they arrive, they refuse to leave. For Ethan Whitmore, the ghost now had a name. Amara Brooks. 3 days after discovering the old photograph, Ethan found himself standing inside the archives department of Whitmore Holdings. The employees looked nervous. The billionaire CEO rarely visited this floor, especially not alone, especially not carrying boxes himself. Yet there he was, searching, digging, looking through the company's earliest years as if he were an outsider investigating someone else's life. Because lately, that was exactly how it felt. The empire still belonged to him. The skyscrapers, the investments, the private jet, the billions. Yet the story behind it all seemed increasingly unfamiliar. A gray-haired archivist approached. Cautiously, Mr. Whitmore? Ethan glanced up. Yes. We found another set of files. The woman handed him a storage box. Its label read, Project Origin, Year 1. Ethan carried it into a private conference room, closed the door, and began opening folders. At first he found ordinary documents. Budget estimates, vendor agreements, construction notes. Nothing unusual. Then he reached the bottom and froze. Inside rested a leather-bound notebook. Amara's notebook. He recognized it instantly. The worn corners, the faded black cover, the tiny gold initials pressed into the leather. AB. His pulse quickened. Slowly, he opened it. The first page contained sketches. The second page contained calculations. The third page contained conceptual diagrams. Every page revealed ideas years ahead of their time. Design systems, spatial efficiency models, sustainability concepts, innovations that would later become foundational pieces of Whitmore Holdings. And every single one had been drawn before the company officially existed, long before investors, long before executives, long before anyone knew Ethan Whitmore's name. For nearly an hour he sat in silence, turning pages, reading notes, following thoughts written by a younger version of the woman he once loved. Then he reached the final page, and there, beneath a rough sketch of a future headquarters, Amara had written, "We'll build something that changes lives." Not I, not me. We'll. The word struck harder than it should have, because somewhere between ambition and success, that word had disappeared. Across the country, Amara's life was moving in the opposite direction. Forward, not backward. The Brooks Design Collective had officially opened its doors. The office occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building near downtown Atlanta. Nothing extravagant. No marble lobby. No executive elevators. No luxury conference rooms. Yet every morning the space felt alive. Young designers filled the workstations. Students rotated through internships. Community projects lined the walls. Ideas flowed freely. Hope flowed even faster. On Friday afternoon, Amara stood beside a large presentation board while her team reviewed plans for a community housing initiative. The project wasn't profitable. In fact, most investors would reject it immediately. But that was never the point. She wasn't building for shareholders. She was building for people. After the meeting ended, her assistant approached quietly. "You have a visitor." Amara looked surprised. "A client?" The young woman smiled. "No." She handed over a business card. The smile vanished from Amara's face. "Whitmore Holdings." For several seconds, she simply stared at it, then handed it back. "I'm not interested." The assistant hesitated. "He says it's important." "I'm sure he does." Without another word, Amara walked away. Some doors were closed for a reason. Back in New York, Ethan received the message later that evening. She refused to meet. The rejection shouldn't have surprised him. Yet somehow it did. Because throughout his life, almost every problem could be solved with enough money, enough influence, or enough persistence. This one couldn't. Money couldn't erase humiliation. Influence couldn't rebuild trust. Persistence couldn't rewrite history. For the first time, he was facing consequences that had no transaction attached to them. That night, he couldn't sleep. Rain tapped softly against the penthouse windows. The city glowed beneath dark clouds. And Ethan found himself staring at another old photograph. Not the one from the apartment. A different one. A charity gala from nearly 8 years earlier. He remembered the event clearly. The company had just secured a major acquisition. Investors celebrated. The media praised him. Everyone wanted photographs with the rising billionaire. Everyone except Amara. While others admired Ethan's success, she had spent most of the evening speaking with scholarship students seated near the back of the ballroom. At the time, he hadn't understood why. Now he wasn't so sure. Something else caught his attention. A detail he had never noticed before. One of the scholarship recipients stood beside Amara in the picture. The young woman wore a silver pin. A symbol. A small circular design. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Because he had seen that symbol before. Recently. Very recently. He rushed toward his desk. Opened the notebook. Turned pages. And there it was. The exact same symbol. Drawn repeatedly in the margins of Amara's earliest designs. His pulse accelerated. A coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. For the first time, a new possibility emerged. What if the secret inside the walnut box wasn't connected to patents? What if it wasn't about ownership? What if the real mystery had been hidden somewhere else all along? Somewhere much bigger. Somewhere much deeper. And somewhere capable of making a billion-dollar empire look insignificant by comparison. Far away in Atlanta, the walnut box rested quietly inside the safe. Still unopened. Still waiting. Still guarding a truth that neither Ethan nor the world was yet prepared to understand. Success has a strange way of changing history. It edits memories, rewrites origins, turns partnerships into legends about lone geniuses. For years, the world had celebrated Ethan Whitmore as a visionary who built an empire from nothing. The magazines said it. The investors believed it. The television interviews repeated it. Even Ethan himself had started believing it. But now the truth was emerging piece by piece. And every piece seemed to point back to one woman. Amara Brooks. Monday morning arrived beneath gray Manhattan skies. Ethan sat alone in the executive boardroom. Around him, the walls displayed photographs documenting the growth of Whitmore Holdings. Groundbreaking ceremonies, corporate acquisitions, ribbon cuttings, award presentations, a visual timeline of success. Yet today those images felt incomplete. Like pages torn from the middle of a story, the symbol from the notebook remained on his desk. Printed, magnified, studied. His research team had spent the entire weekend investigating it. At exactly 9 o'clock, his chief legal officer entered the room. Her expression was unusually serious. That immediately caught Ethan's attention. "What did you find?" The woman placed a folder on the table. Then another. Then another. 3 folders, each thicker than the last. Ethan frowned. "That much." The lawyer nodded. "More than we expected." A silence settled between them. Finally, she opened the first folder. Inside were scholarship records, dozens of them, then hundreds, then thousands, college grants, housing assistance, professional mentorship programs, emergency education funds, programs stretching back nearly 15 years, programs connected by one recurring symbol, the same symbol from Amara's notebook, the same symbol from the gala photograph, the same symbol that had appeared repeatedly throughout her personal papers. Ethan stared at the pages, confused. What exactly am I looking at? The lawyer exhaled slowly. You are looking at the Brooks Foundation. His eyes narrowed. The what? The Brooks Foundation. Ethan shook his head. I've never heard of it. That's the point. The answer landed heavily. Because Ethan knew Amara. Or at least he thought he did. How could she have operated an entire foundation without him knowing? The lawyer continued. It isn't public. How much money are we talking about? Another pause. Then the number arrived. Nearly $30 million. Ethan blinked, certain he had misheard. 30 million? Over 14 years. The room suddenly felt smaller. $30 million. Quietly spent. Quietly invested. Quietly given away. No press releases. No interviews. No publicity campaigns. No social media announcements. Nothing. The foundation existed almost entirely beneath public view. Helping students. Single mothers. Veterans. Community projects. Young entrepreneurs. People who otherwise would never have received a chance. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared, trying to process what he was hearing. Then another realization surfaced. A disturbing one. Where did the money come from? The lawyer slid another document across the table. Mostly from her. His heartbeat slowed. What do you mean? Royalties. The word hit like a hammer. Royalties from consulting work. Design contracts. Independent projects. Private investments she had made years earlier. While Ethan expanded Whitmore Holdings, Amara had quietly built something else. Not an empire. A legacy. And she had never told anyone. Across Atlanta, another Monday was beginning. The Brooks Design Collective buzzed with activity. Students moved between drafting tables. Architects debated layouts. Coffee cups sat beside unfinished blueprints. And at the center of it all stood Amara. Calm. Focused. Certain. A young intern approached nervously. Ms. Brooks. She smiled. Yes. The girl handed over an acceptance letter. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I got in. Amara read the letter. Stanford University. Full admission. Architecture program. The young woman began crying. You changed my life. Amara immediately shook her head. No. The girl looked confused. Amara gently touched the acceptance letter. You changed your own life. The student hugged her. And for a brief moment, Amara closed her eyes. Because moments like these were why she never regretted any sacrifice. Not one. Not even the painful ones. Back in New York, Ethan continued reading. The more records he reviewed, the more impossible everything became. One scholarship recipient had founded a technology company. Another had become a surgeon. Another had become a federal judge. Hundreds of lives. Thousands of families. Entire futures altered by decisions Amara made quietly from the shadows. The empire Ethan built generated headlines. The empire Amara built generated opportunities. One produced wealth. The other produced transformation. And suddenly Ethan understood something he should have understood years ago. He had spent his life measuring success by accumulation. Amara measured success by impact. That evening, he left the office unusually early. The city lights flickered across Manhattan. Traffic flowed beneath towering buildings. Yet none of it captured his attention. His thoughts remained fixed on one question. Why hide all of this? Why keep it secret? Why let the world underestimate her? The answer arrived unexpectedly when he reached home. Waiting outside his penthouse was a small envelope. No return address. No sender. Only his name. Inside rested a single photograph. Nothing more. The image showed a younger Amara standing beside a group of scholarship students. All of them smiling. All of them holding certificates. And on the back, written in her unmistakable handwriting, were 7 simple words. The greatest investments never appear on balance sheets. Ethan stared at the message. Again. And again. Then his eyes drifted downward. Toward the bottom corner of the photograph, where another familiar symbol had been drawn. The symbol from the notebook. The symbol from the foundation. The symbol from the gala. Except this time there was something new. A date. A specific date. one that matched the day Amara had placed the walnut box into the safe. And for the first time, Ethan realized the box was never protecting the past. It was protecting the final piece of a much larger story. A story the entire world had completely missed. And somewhere inside that box waited the name of the woman nobody truly knew. Some secrets are hidden because they are dangerous. Others are hidden because they are sacred. For months, Ethan Whitmore had assumed the walnut box contained evidence. A contract, a patent, documents capable of threatening his company. Something valuable enough to justify years of silence. But as more pieces emerged, that explanation no longer fit. The deeper he looked into Amara Brooks, the more one truth became impossible to ignore. She had never been motivated by ownership. She had never chased recognition. And she certainly had never cared about revenge. Which meant the answer inside the box had to be something else. Something far more personal. Far more important. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Ethan boarded a flight to Atlanta. Not as a billionaire. Not as a CEO. Simply as a man chasing answers. For the first time in years, he traveled without assistance. Without security. Without publicity. The flight lasted less than 2 hours. Yet it felt much longer. Because every mile brought him closer to a version of Amara he had never truly known. Meanwhile, across the city, Amara sat alone inside her office. The building was quiet. Most of the staff had already gone home. The setting sun spilled golden light across the room. Blueprints rested neatly on her desk. Scholarship applications sat in organized stacks nearby. And beneath everything else was the walnut box. The same box she had carried out of the courthouse. The same box she had protected for years. For a long time she simply stared at it. Silent. Thoughtful. Almost nostalgic. Then she reached forward. Her fingers brushed the smooth walnut surface. The gesture felt strangely ceremonial. As though she were touching a doorway to another life. A life she had spent years trying to leave behind. At that exact moment, a soft knock interrupted the silence. Amara looked up. Her assistant appeared. You have a visitor. Immediately, she knew. Somehow she simply knew. The assistant hesitated. He says his name is Ethan. The room became still. Not tense. Not angry. Just still. Like the final seconds before a storm reaches shore. Amara lowered her eyes toward the walnut box. Then closed the lid on the desk drawer where it rested. Send him in. A minute later, Ethan entered the office. Neither spoke. Not immediately. Years of memories stood between them. Years of mistakes. Years of silence. The man who entered looked different from the billionaire who had walked into divorce court months earlier. The confidence remained. The wealth remained. But something else had appeared. Humility. And perhaps for the first time in his adult life, uncertainty. Ethan glanced around the office. Simple furniture. Student projects displayed proudly on the walls. Community awards. Photographs. Lives being changed. No luxury. No ego. Only purpose. Finally, he spoke. I found the foundation. Amara nodded. I figured you would. You never told me. A faint smile crossed her face. You never asked. The answer hurt because it was true. For years he had assumed he understood her. Without actually listening. Ethan stepped closer. Why keep it secret? Amara looked toward the window. At the fading Atlanta skyline. At the city she had helped rebuild one life at a time. Then she answered softly. Because helping people isn't supposed to be a performance. The words lingered between them. Simple, yet devastating. Because they exposed a difference Ethan had spent years refusing to see. One built influence. The other built meaning. A long silence followed. Then Ethan asked the question consuming him for weeks. The box. Amara's eyes shifted toward the desk. For the first time, emotion appeared on her face. Not fear. Not regret. Something deeper. Something almost protective. The box was never about the company. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. I know. It was never about money. I know. It was never about winning. His voice softened. I know. The room grew quiet again. Then Amara slowly opened the desk drawer. The walnut box emerged into the fading light. For years it had existed as a mystery. A symbol. A ghost. Now it rested between them. Real. Ordinary. Yet somehow carrying the weight of an entire lifetime. Carefully, she lifted the lid. Inside were no patents. No legal documents. No ownership records. No evidence capable of destroying Whitmore Holdings. Instead, there were photographs. Hundreds of them. Small handwritten letters. Drawings. Birthday cards. Scholarship notes. Thank you messages. Pictures of graduates. Families. Children. Veterans. Single mothers. Dreamers. People whose lives had changed because someone believed in them. Ethan stared in disbelief. The contents looked less like a fortune and more like a lifetime of love. His throat tightened. That's it. Amara smiled gently. No. She reached beneath the photographs. Hidden at the very bottom rested a sealed envelope. A single envelope. Yellowed with age. Protected for years. Never opened. Never shared. Across the front, written in black ink, were 4 words. For the day you understand. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Because he recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to Amara. But it had been written nearly 15 years earlier. Long before the company. Long before the marriage. Long before the betrayal. And suddenly he understood why the box mattered. Not because it protected a secret. Because it protected a promise. A promise from the woman he had once loved. A promise she never stopped keeping. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Ethan stared at the envelope. And for the first time, he realized the greatest treasure Amara Brooks had ever guarded wasn't her work. Wasn't her success. Wasn't even her legacy. It was the truth about who she had always been. And he was finally standing at the threshold of understanding it. The envelope rested between them like a heartbeat frozen in time. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Outside the office windows, Atlanta glowed beneath the evening sky. Traffic lights flickered. Headlights drifted through the streets below. Life continued. Yet inside that quiet room, time itself seemed suspended. Ethan stared at the handwriting. For the day you understand. 15 years. 15 years she had protected this letter. 15 years without opening it again. Without destroying it. Without sharing it. Without using it against him. And suddenly, Ethan realized something that made his chest tighten. Amara had never expected this day to come. If she had, the envelope would have been waiting on his desk years ago. Instead, she had buried it inside a box full of other people's dreams. As if her own pain mattered less than their futures. Slowly, Ethan lifted his eyes. Why didn't you give this to me? Amara sat quietly. The fading sunlight painted soft shadows across her face. Because understanding can't be forced. Her voice remained calm. You either arrive there on your own. She glanced toward the envelope. Or you never arrive at all. The words landed harder than any accusation ever could. For years Ethan had demanded answers. Demanded control. Demanded explanations. But understanding was different. It couldn't be purchased. Couldn't be negotiated. Couldn't be won in court. A silence settled between them. Then Amara gently pushed the envelope across the desk. Toward him. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. His hand hovered above it. Strangely afraid. Not of what the letter might say, but of what it might reveal about himself. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet. Nothing more. No legal secrets. No hidden ownership claims. No financial leverage. Just a letter. Written by a younger Amara. A woman who still believed the future would be built together. Ethan unfolded the page. The first line immediately stole the air from his lungs. If you're reading this, it means one of 2 things. His eyes moved lower. Either we built the life we dreamed about. A pause. Or we forgot why we started. The room became impossibly quiet. Every word felt alive. Like a voice speaking directly across 15 years. He continued reading. I know you're ambitious. I know you'll become successful. I know you'll change the world. But if success ever costs you kindness, if power ever costs you gratitude, if winning ever costs you love, then none of it will be worth keeping. Ethan stopped breathing. The words blurred. Because every sentence felt less like a prediction and more like a verdict. Years ago, she had seen the danger before it happened. Years ago, she had recognized the path he might take. And somehow she had loved him anyway. He swallowed hard and continued. I hope when that day comes, you remember who sat beside you on the apartment floor, who believed in you before the headlines, before the investors, before the money, before everyone else. A sharp pain spread through his chest. Memories flooded back. The tiny apartment, cheap takeout dinners, shared dreams, late nights covered in sketches and blueprints. Back when success had felt simple. Back when they had measured wealth and possibilities. Not dollars. A drop landed on the paper. For a moment Ethan didn't understand. Then he realized it was a tear. He looked away, ashamed. But Amara didn't react. She didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't enjoy his regret. Because this was never about punishment. It never had been. At the bottom of the page waited the final paragraph. Ethan read slowly, almost afraid. If one day you lose sight of what matters, I hope life is kind enough to give you another chance. And if that day comes, don't spend it mourning what you lost. Spend it becoming someone worthy of what remains. The letter ended there. No signature, no dramatic farewell, just silence. The kind of silence that leaves no place to hide. For several moments, Ethan simply stared at the page, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to escape the truth. Because for the first time, he understood the purpose of the box. The photographs, the scholarship letters, the thank you notes, the envelope. None of them were evidence. They were reminders. Proof that a meaningful life was measured by lives touched, not wealth accumulated. Amara had spent 15 years building exactly what she promised. Changing lives, creating opportunities, leaving behind light wherever darkness existed. And she had done it quietly, without recognition, without applause, without demanding anything in return. Ethan finally folded the letter. His hands trembled slightly. "How did you know?" he whispered. Amara looked at him carefully, then smiled with heartbreaking gentleness. "Because the man I fell in love with wasn't the man who divorced me." The words shattered something inside him. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Outside, the city lights brightened against the darkening sky. Inside, Ethan Whitmore sat surrounded by the evidence of a life he had failed to see. And for the first time since the divorce, he stopped wondering what secret Amara had hidden from him. Instead, he began asking a far more painful question. How many years had he spent hiding from himself? And deep within that question, another realization quietly emerged. The greatest chapter of Amara's story wasn't behind her. It was still unfolding. And somewhere beyond the walls of that office, thousands of lives carried pieces of a legacy Ethan had only just begun to understand. That night, Ethan Whitmore did not return to his hotel. Instead, he walked, alone, through the quiet streets of Atlanta. The city stretched around him in pools of amber light and shadow. Restaurants buzzed with laughter. Couples crossed intersections hand in hand. Music drifted from open doors. Life moved forward. Yet Ethan felt trapped somewhere between the man he had been and the man he no longer wanted to remain. The folded letter rested inside his jacket pocket, close to his heart, like a compass he had discovered far too late. Every few blocks, he found himself touching it, not to reread it, just to remind himself it was real. Because nothing in that office had unfolded the way he expected. He had arrived searching for a secret. Instead, he had found a mirror. And for the first time in years, he didn't like the reflection staring back. Hours later, he finally returned to his hotel suite. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Luxury surrounded him. Italian marble, rare artwork, custom furniture, the kind of life millions dreamed about. Yet standing there alone, Ethan felt something he had never felt inside his own success. Empty. Not because he lacked money, but because he suddenly understood how much of himself had been sacrificed to obtain it. For years, he had viewed success as a destination, a finish line, a victory. But Amara had revealed something entirely different. Success wasn't what you accumulated. It was what remained after you were gone. The realization followed him into sleep and haunted him when morning arrived. The next day, Ethan canceled every meeting, every conference call, every investor briefing. His executive assistant nearly panicked. Board members demanded explanations. Major clients requested updates. For the first time in over a decade, Ethan ignored them all. Instead, he drove to an address he had discovered in the Brooks Foundation records, a scholarship center on the south side of Atlanta. The building itself appeared modest. Nothing extraordinary. No signs carrying Amara's name. No monuments. No publicity campaigns. Only a simple brick structure filled with students. As Ethan entered, conversations echoed through the hallways. Young people studied at long tables. Mentors met with scholarship recipients. Career counselors reviewed resumes. Dreams were being built everywhere he looked. A woman at the front desk greeted him. "Can I help you?" Ethan hesitated. "I'd like to learn about this place." The receptionist smiled. "We change lives here." The answer sounded familiar, because it was exactly the kind of answer Amara would give. For the next 2 hours, Ethan listened. He met a young woman preparing for medical school, a former foster child attending Yale, a veteran starting his own engineering company. A single mother completing her law degree. Each story felt extraordinary, yet something connected them all. Hope, opportunity, a second chance. And every path somehow led back to the same source. Amara Brooks. One photograph in particular stopped him cold. It hung quietly in a hallway. Easy to miss. The image showed a much younger Amara standing beside a group of scholarship recipients. No designer clothes. No recognition plaques. No cameras. Just a smile. A genuine smile. The kind he hadn't seen in years. Beneath the photo was a quote. 6 simple words. Success means lifting someone else higher. Ethan stared at it for a long time, because he couldn't remember the last time he had built something without expecting recognition. Meanwhile, across town, Amara sat inside a community center reviewing architectural plans. A neighborhood redevelopment project. Affordable housing. Public gardens. Educational spaces. Another initiative. Another opportunity. Another quiet investment in people she would probably never meet. Her phone vibrated. A message appeared. One of her foundation directors. Ethan Whitmore visited today. Amara read the message twice, then set the phone down. No surprise crossed her face. No satisfaction. No triumph. Only a quiet understanding. Because she knew something nobody else did. The transformation happening inside Ethan had nothing to do with her. People changed only when they chose to, not when they were forced. Back at the scholarship center, Ethan prepared to leave. But before reaching the exit, an elderly janitor called out to him. "Mr. Whitmore?" Ethan turned. The man smiled warmly. "I recognize you." Ethan nodded politely. The janitor glanced toward the hallway of photographs, then said something unexpected. "Miss Brooks always believed you'd come." Ethan froze. The words hit harder than anything he had heard all day. "What?" The old man chuckled softly. "Not soon. Not easily. But eventually." His eyes drifted toward the photograph. "She said the day would come when you'd stop counting money and start counting meaning." Silence swallowed the room, because those words sounded exactly like something Amara would say. The janitor continued. "She never stopped believing there was good in you." Then he walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone, motionless, overwhelmed. For years, Ethan had believed the divorce ended their story, that the courthouse had marked the final chapter. But now another truth was beginning to emerge. Amara hadn't spent 15 years protecting herself from him. She had spent 15 years protecting a belief that one day he might become the man she always saw beneath the ambition. And as Ethan stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight, another question quietly surfaced. If Amara had never stopped believing in his potential, why had he stopped believing in hers? And somewhere deep inside that painful realization, the first seeds of redemption finally began to grow.